You're watching the legal breakdown. So, Glenn, two major events happened this past week. Trump threatened death against then Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, and he suggested that he was purchasing a gun, a Glock, in South Carolina. Jack Smith noticed both of these events. So, what did he do with these new pieces of information?
Brian, I think as a result of these two incidents, Donald Trump is about to be gagged by Judge Chutkan. Sort of more specifically, Jack Smith just filed another motion in court urging Judge Chutkan to place some narrowly tailored restrictions on Donald Trump's speech and on his posts so that he is formally on notice that he may not, he must not threaten, harass, or intimidate witnesses or judges or court personnel or prosecutors, and he may not say anything that might taint future jury pools. So this litigation is now sort of reaching ahead because you may recall Jack Smith originally filed this request. Donald Trump's defense attorneys filed a reply that frankly was laughable and really poorly written and reasoned. And just today, Jack Smith has filed his reply. Judge Chutkan has set a hearing for October 16th. And then I'm pretty sure after that, she will promptly gag Donald Trump. She will issue a narrowly tailored restriction on what Donald Trump can and can't say.
Well, Jack Smith is seeking a gag order, but Trump will violate it. He's already violated his gag order. So what are we doing here? Like, has this train not already left the station?
The train has left the station and it's about 100 miles down the track. But the thing is, the judge has to set things up formally if she's going to take the ultimate step of either holding Trump in contempt for violating a formal court order or sort of impose the ultimate penalty, which is revoking him on pretrial release and detaining him pending trial. I maintain Donald Trump has already done more than enough to warrant pretrial detention, but clearly we're not there yet in the mind of the judge and even in the mind of Jack Smith. Here's what's going on. When Donald Trump was first presented in court in his Washington, D.C. prosecution, he was admonished by the magistrate judge that you better not do anything that could be perceived as, for example, threatening, intimidating, or harassing witnesses. But there was no formal order put in place at that time. It was a general admonishment. And of course, Trump immediately went out and did the things that he was admonished not to do. So that has now brought us to where we are presently, which is that the parties have filed motions and replies. The judge has set a hearing on this issue, and that is when the judge will order Donald Trump, will put a formal court order in place that he may not threaten witnesses, he may not poison the jury pool. And then the next step, because all of this has to be done incrementally if it's going to be bulletproof on appeal, the next step will be when, not if, as you have said, when Donald Trump violates the formal court order that is entered, that's when the judge will take up sanctions up to and including revoking him on pretrial release.
Okay, because thus far we've seen him attack prosecutors, attack the judge, attack the city that he's in, attack Jeff Duncan, and thereby commit a state crime in the state of Georgia, which was another condition of his pretrial release. Now he's attacking General Milley, who again is a witness in all of this, and attempt to buy a firearm, which would be illegal for an indicted felon in South Carolina. So at this point, if Judge Chutkan does agree to impose this narrow gag order that's being requested by Jack Smith, is that it? Is this the last warning that Donald Trump's going to get? And if he commits any more of these violations of his pretrial release, then we will see some type of sanction?
We certainly should. I have seen judges be overly forgiving of defendants when they violate a formally imposed restriction on their pretrial release, like a gag order, a prohibition against saying certain things. Often judges will like to give a defendant chance after chance because sometimes the judges believe if they give them a really stern talking to, they will somehow come into compliance. There's one thing we know, Brian, Donald Trump will never come into compliance with any restrictions or prohibitions that are placed on him. But I'm glad you brought up the two incidents that we see are actually prominently featured in the latest filing by Jack Smith. One is the death threat against Mark Milley. You know, I was pleased when I read through Jack Smith's 20-page filing that he prominently featured that information. In fact, it is the only Trump post that in this court filing, Jack Smith sort of fully reproduced. He mentioned other statements by Donald Trump and other posts by Donald Trump, but the Milley one is prominently featured. And here is what Jack Smith concludes his discussion about, you know, the threat that Donald Trump leveled against a witness, General Milley, saying he should be executed because in Trump's estimation, he committed treason. Of course, he didn't. Here is what Jack Smith says. He says, no other criminal defendant would be permitted to issue public statements insinuating that a known witness in his case should be executed. This defendant should not be either. But Brian, I want to take that one step further, because any defendant on pretrial release in a federal felony case, take it from this former 30-year prosecutor, if they had leveled a death threat against a witness or a victim in a bank robbery case, or if they leveled a threat in a robbery case about the person they had robbed or a witness to the robbery, or in a shooting case, if a defendant on pretrial release leveled a death threat saying the person should be executed, they would find themselves in a jail cell so fast it would make their heads spin. So let's not pretend that there aren't two different standards at play here. One for Donald Trump, former president and current presidential candidate, and another for every other human being in the United States. That's unfortunate. I understand why it's playing out that way, but it's wrong.
Glenn, do you have any worry about the fact that because we're not seeing really any movement on the sanction front against Donald Trump as the result of his violations of his release, that Trump will then be emboldened to commit more and more of these violations, since we know Trump, we know how he acts when there's no consequences. And so, you know, even though this process is playing out right now, that doesn't change the fact that he still can taint the jury pool. He still can level death threats against people. He still can try to intimidate witnesses into not testifying against him. Does that worry you at all?
I worry not only that he will be emboldened, I worry that his most extreme and dangerous supporters will be emboldened to continue to act on his calls. For example, saying General Milley should be executed. So it worries me with respect to Trump, and it also worries me with respect to the legitimacy of the criminal justice system writ large, because if others who are involved in criminal activity see Donald Trump's conduct going unaddressed and unpunished, that really does breed a contempt for the system that can encourage even more lawlessness. You know, you mentioned the information about Donald Trump potentially purchasing a gun. We all saw the video where Donald Trump had a pistol, a firearm, specifically a Glock, in his hand, and he said, I want to buy one. Well, one of his spokespeople then posted that Donald Trump purchased a Glock in South Carolina. And then maybe recognizing that would violate federal law because he is under felony indictment in not one, but 4 cases, the spokesperson printed a retraction. Oh, no. He said he wanted to purchase one, but he neither purchased nor possessed one. Well, how ridiculous is that when we all see Donald Trump literally possessing a firearm? Now, the simple handling of it may not have violated the law, but purchasing one would have. So, you know, what does this do for the respect for the rule of law as far as the general public is concerned? Donald Trump and his people are basically making a mockery of the whole thing.
Let's wrap it up with this. What is, and I apologize if you've said this before because I do know that you've mentioned the date of October 16th, but what are next steps? When will we get an answer from Judge Chutkan as to whether she will approve a gag order against Trump?
Yeah, so the next step is the case will be up in court here in Washington, D.C. on October 16th. I'll be in the courtroom watching it unfold. And then we will have to await Judge Chutkan's ruling, because on the 16th, both parties will go into court. Now, mind you, she has again waived Donald Trump's appearance. He does not have to personally appear. I have mixed feelings about that, because defendants ordinarily always have to appear in their criminal cases, unlike in their civil cases. But I also understand that in these pretrial hearings, the security that is involved in having Donald Trump come to the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. I know, because I've been there, for hearings when Donald Trump was attending. It turns into an enormous production. It makes it very difficult for the citizens to get around. It makes it difficult for people to actually get into the courthouse. So I understand, why Judge Chutkan would waive his appearance. But again, it is an example of the sort of selective treatment and beneficial treatment that Donald Trump is getting. But after that hearing is held on October 16th, then we'll have to wait for Judge Chutkan's decision. I suspect it will come promptly, and I suspect she will order some sort of restrictions on Donald Trump's speech and posts. And then the next question will be, once he violates those conditions, what does Judge Chutkan do?
And of course, we'll cover all of that as it continues to unfold. So for anybody watching, if you want to stay on top of all this stuff, make sure to subscribe. The links are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.